Okay, welcome back to members of 121 Community Church in Grapevine, Texas, in our ongoing study in Paul and the Faithfulness of God by N.T. Wright. We had a lot of content in this lesson on the practical aspect of mindset. So we're going to look at a recall triad for pages 433 to 451 that deal with the practical implications of nous mindset when it moves into phronesis and praxis. Let's begin by looking at block one. We're going to look at the 3 moments of praxis ministry. And Professor Wright tells us that Paul has the 3 moments of cross, resurrection, and exodus. And exodus, you can kind of put that exodus/spirit, cross, resurrection, exodus, spirit. Cross, for the believer, they take on the sufferings and bearing of Christ's cross, building to the threshold of the messianic woes. The resurrection becomes the sign. The ecclesia becomes the sign community of foretaste of the doxa glory in the world, anticipating the full return and full doxa glory of the eschaton. The exodus for Paul, ecclesia, is the true exodus community in bearing Christ's image in every aspect of ministry. The ecclesia is made up of Christ image bearers that bear the light of the gospel into the world, and they become the true exodus community, working toward spiritual liberation for all humanity, all creation. But this has to get practical, so we go to block 2, and we take a look at the practical step of reaching actuality. Mindset has to move on to the practical. Number 1, phronesis, practical wisdom. The believer there's a forming of a practical consciousness for positing the divine worldview. At first, that worldview is very general, but then of its own self-actualizing power, it moves toward practical actuality. It becomes specific praxis as the positing of the means, by positing the means of ministry through ecclesia sub-communities, says Professor Wright. And then Paul did take up the universality of messianic vision and mission, positing the concept of one true family for the ecclesia and living out a Messiah-based eschatology in the present as those who are raised up now in the Spirit and living toward the final eschaton, but living now in that messianic way of life. And so you've got the ideal marker of praxis ministry as cross, resurrection, and exodus. You have the practical implementation of that marker as practical wisdom, as the means of ecclesia sub-communities, and messianic vision. That leads to ministry and return. Return moment of intensification of the nous mindset and cardiac conviction. The returning surplus of promise leads the believer to refine the signs of Exodus community and the sign of messianic humanity. The believer always leaves the mindset open for revision, so that as believers we are always revising and rewriting and maturing in our worldview second nature. We're always moving forward in maturing that worldview second nature, teaches Paul in his theology, says Professor Wright. So it's a great look at Professor Wright getting us ready for part 3 of his book. He wants us to fully understand mindset, and we will just kind of talk through the mindset line here also on this recall triad. Take a look at that Paul's methodology in 4 moments of ecclesia. We'll take a look at mindset as just kind of a recall here. Paul begins with the nous mindset of the markers of crucifixion and resurrection, they inform our cardiac conviction of the heart. Out of that conviction, we order the signs of God's kingdom. We put them into an ordered thought picture which is coupled with our conviction. We have a picture of how we perceive God's kingdom. But for Paul, it must become practical. It must become phronesis, practical wisdom, a specific application. So we look at the world, we look at our possibilities, we look at the means available, we make that thought picture into something more practical. And then we take up ministry of praxis action, praxis reflection, and praxis refinement of signification. So we got great teaching here from Professor Wright, and that'll wrap up our recall triad for pages 433 to 451.